I shouldn't have been there that late.
Students
The bookstore was
faculty
supposed
to
to
bring
close at
here on
9, but I stayed, pretending to browse the same shelf for the third time. It wasn't about the books. It was about her. Elena Carter moved through the aisles with the kind of quiet grace that didn't belong to anyone under 40. She didn't hurry, didn't fidget. Every motion was precise, like she'd already learned there was nothing in life worth rushing for. And maybe that was why I couldn't look away. She didn't look at me at first, not really. Just a polite glance, a nod, the same one she gave everyone. But then there was a second glance. Longer, almost questioning. The kind that made my throat tighten and my palms itch, like maybe she knew what I hadn't said out loud, that I came here for her. The hum of the old air conditioner filled the silence. Outside, the rain was soft but steady, smearing the glow of the street lamps into long streaks across the glass. Inside, it was just the two of us, the smell of paper and coffee clinging to the quiet. I caught her reflection in the darkened window as she stacked a few returns behind the counter. Hair pulled up carelessly, a few strands falling loose around her face. The curve of her mouth, that almost smile she didn't know she had, it pulled me in like gravity. When she finally spoke, it startled me. "You're here late," she said, not looking up from the book in her hands. "Yeah, I managed. Guess I lost track of time." She tilted her head, finally meeting my eyes. There was something in her gaze that made my chest tighten, not sharp, not soft, just steady. "Seeing. Or maybe," she said, voice low, "you just like the company." Heat climbed my neck. I wanted to look away, but couldn't. Her eyes held me there, like she was waiting for me to flinch first. I didn't. She set the book down slowly, deliberate, and came around the counter. Her heels barely made a sound against the worn wood floor, but every step landed like a drumbeat in my chest. When she passed by me, her sleeve brushed my arm. It wasn't an accident. It was too careful to be an accident, and my breath caught before I could hide it. She noticed. God, of course she noticed. At the back of the store, she reached up to straighten a crooked sign, her blouse shifting just enough to make my pulse stumble. Then, over her shoulder, she said it. Not teasing, not cruel, just impossibly calm. "I'm too old to play games." Something in my chest twisted. She turned then, slowly, and for the first time that night, she smiled. Not polite, not distant, a real smile, small and sharp, like a secret. "So," she said, letting the word linger between us, "let's break the rules tonight." The room felt too quiet, too close. The hum of the air conditioner, the rain outside, even the creak of the old ceiling fan. All of it faded under the weight of her voice. I didn't move. I couldn't. Her hand brushed the edge of the counter as she stepped closer, and for a second, just a second, I thought she might touch me. Then, the sharp rattle of the front door. Both of us froze. A figure appeared in the glass, someone fumbling with the handle, shaking off an umbrella. The bell above the door chimed as it opened, letting in a gust of wet night air. She didn't look at them. She didn't even turn. Her eyes stayed on me, steady and unflinching, as if to say, "Don't go anywhere. This isn't over." The stranger barely stayed 5 minutes. Picked up a book, paid in cash, and slipped back out into the rain, leaving the bell above the door trembling in their wake. Silence settled again, heavy and sharp, but different now. She was behind the counter again, sorting through receipts that didn't need sorting, her gaze fixed anywhere but on me. I should have left, said goodnight, walked out, let the moment fade before it became something it shouldn't. But I didn't. Instead, I leaned against the nearest shelf, trying to look casual, even though my pulse was a drumbeat in my throat. "You close late a lot," I said, my voice too quiet to sound confident. She glanced up. "Bookstore life," she replied, the corners of her mouth hinting at that secret smile again. "Not as glamorous as it looks." I swallowed, nodded, but didn't move. Something in the way she looked at me made my chest ache. Like she was searching for an excuse, or maybe a reason to send me away and keep me there all at once. Her hand stilled over the counter. "You're what, 26? She asked. 27, I said quickly. "Last month." She hummed softly, almost to herself. 27. Then, quieter. I was already married by then. The word married landed heavier than I expected. I didn't ask questions, but something in her face, the way her eyes dropped for a fraction of a second, the way her hand tightened around the edge of the counter, told me enough. Someone had left. Or maybe she had. Either way, The kind of hurt that doesn't fade was still there, tucked behind the calm. "I'm not married," I said, not sure why I said it, only knowing that I needed her to hear it. She looked up then, slowly, like she wanted to measure the truth in my eyes before deciding if she'd let herself believe it. The air between us shifted. She came around the counter again, closer this time, her perfume wrapping around me, something soft, expensive, and subtle enough that I could pretend I didn't notice. She stopped a few feet away, her hand trailing along the spines of a row of classics, not looking at me, not directly. "You know how this looks, don't you?" she said, her voice low. I forced a laugh I didn't feel. Like two people talking in a bookstore. Her eyes flicked to mine, sharp, almost amused, but there was something else there too. Something that made my throat dry. "Like a mistake waiting to happen," she said. I didn't have an answer for that. And maybe that was why I didn't stop her when she moved closer, the space between us shrinking until I could feel the warmth of her shoulder near mine. My breath caught when her hand brushed against my arm. Light, almost absent, like it hadn't happened at all. But it had. God, it had. I turned my head slightly, just enough to catch her looking, not with the confidence she'd had before, but something softer, something careful, vulnerable. "Why do you stay so late, Ryan?" she asked, and hearing my name in her voice did something to me I couldn't explain. I wanted to tell her the truth, that I came because being near her made the rest of my life feel less aimless, less empty. But the words caught in my throat. Too big, too dangerous. "Just like it here," I said instead. Her lips curved, barely. Liar. The word didn't sting. It wasn't meant to. Her hand lifted then, as if to touch my face, my hair, something, but stopped just short, hanging there for a breath before she pulled back, retreating like she hadn't moved at all. But the moment stayed. The rain outside had eased to a whisper, the world beyond the glass blurred and quiet. Inside, the hum of the lights and the faint ticking of the clock filled the silence, but neither of us said anything. She turned, finally, walking toward the back room, but at the doorway she paused, just for a second, and then, without looking back, she said, so softly I almost missed it, "Lock up for me, would you?" It wasn't a question. It was something closer to trust that it was a Tuesday night. Quiet, the kind of quiet that made every sound sharper. The kind of night where you could hear the hum of the fridge in the back room and the rustle of a single page turning from across the store. I was halfway through shelving the new arrivals when I heard the door chime. Reflexively, I glanced up and froze. Elena was there, leaning against the counter, one hand wrapped around a paper cup, steam curling into the dim air. She wasn't supposed to be here that night. Tuesdays were her nights off. "You shouldn't be here," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, casual. She tilted her head, eyes steady on me. "Neither should you," she murmured. And then, softer, "But I'm glad you are." That simple admission lit something sharp and electric in my chest. I didn't trust myself to answer, so I just went back to shelving, pretending I couldn't feel her gaze following me down the aisle. Every step closer she took, I felt it, the air growing warmer, heavier. And then she was next to me, close enough that her shoulder almost brushed mine, close enough that I caught that same soft perfume, the one I'd started to crave like air. "Ryan," she said quietly. I turned my head. Too fast. Too obvious. Her eyes flicked down, catching on my mouth for the briefest second before meeting my gaze again. "This," she whispered, then stopped, shaking her head like she was trying to convince herself of something. But before either of us could move, the bell above the door chimed again. We both jerked back, instinctively, like we'd been caught in something neither of us could name. It was only Marcy, the older woman who ran the cafe next door, stepping in, cheeks flushed from the cold night air. She smiled, oblivious, chatting about how quiet it had been all evening, asking Elena if she'd finalized the order for the holiday event. I stood there, frozen, the thud of my pulse loud in my ears. Elena was calm, poised, her voice perfectly even as she answered, even laughing at something Marcy said. But her hands were tight on the counter, knuckles pale, like holding herself together was costing her something. When Marcy finally left, the silence that followed felt like gravity, pulling everything between us into something denser, hotter. Elena didn't look at me right away. She busied herself straightening a stack of flyers that didn't need straightening, her back to me, her shoulders taut. I took a step toward her, then another. When I was close enough to touch her, I stopped. My hand hovered just behind her shoulder, close enough to feel the warmth radiating off her, but not close enough to bridge the space. Elena, I said, her name catching in my throat. She turned, slow, deliberate. Her eyes locked on mine, and for a moment, neither of us breathed. You don't understand, she whispered, her voice thin, strained. People talk. They'll... She trailed off, shaking her head. You'll regret this. I won't, I said, too quickly, too sure. Not for a second. Something broke in her expression. Not a crack, not exactly, but a softening, a surrender she didn't want to give. She stepped closer, just a fraction, but enough that the space between us disappeared. My pulse thundered. I could see every detail. The faint line of freckles across her cheekbones, the way a strand of hair had fallen loose to frame her face, the tremor in her lip like she wanted to speak but didn't trust her voice. And then her hand lifted, slow, hesitant, until her fingers brushed my jaw. Barely a touch, the lightest trace. I didn't move. Her breath was warm, close, almost mingling with mine. A whisper of air between us. And then, the sharp buzz of her phone on the counter broke the moment. She flinched, pulling back like the space had burned her. I closed my eyes for a second, swallowing the frustration, the ache that coiled tight in my chest. She silenced the phone without looking at it, but the spell was broken. Still, as she walked past me toward the back, she didn't pull away the way she used to. When her arm brushed mine, she let it linger, just long enough to tell me. This isn't over. It had been 3 days since that almost touch. 3 days of her avoiding my eyes and me pretending not to notice. 3 days where every glance, every quiet thank you or good night carried the weight of something we weren't saying. By Thursday, I couldn't take it anymore. The store was empty, the clock creeping past closing time, the hum of the old air conditioner filling the silence. She was at the register, counting bills she'd already counted twice. I stood by the shelves, pretending to organize paperbacks, every nerve wired tight. Elena, I said finally. She stilled, her back straightening just slightly, like the sound of her name had pulled a thread she'd been trying to hold together. Yes. I walked toward her, slow, careful. The soft thud of my footsteps sounded too loud in the quiet room. When I reached the counter, she didn't look up, her fingers moving deliberately, stacking, aligning, avoiding. This, I stopped, swallowed. I can't keep pretending nothing's happening. That made her look at me. Finally, her gaze was sharp, guarded, but there was something underneath, something that matched the ache twisting in my chest. You think you know what this is, she said softly. But you don't. I stepped closer. Then tell me. Her breath caught, barely audible, but enough. For a second, she didn't move, didn't speak. Then she closed her eyes, her shoulders lowering like she'd been holding a weight too long. I'm twice your age, she whispered. People will talk. They'll say things. They'll make it ugly. And she stopped, shaking her head. I can't do ugly again. I didn't think. I just moved. Around the counter, closing the space between us until I could feel the warmth of her. She didn't step back. I don't care what they say, I said, my voice low, rougher than I meant. I care about this. About you. Her eyes opened, and for the first time, I saw the fear there. Not fear of me. Fear of wanting this as much as I did. Ryan, she breathed, but it wasn't a warning. It was a plea. I reached up, slow, giving her every chance to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. My fingers grazed her cheek, and the heat of her skin made my chest tighten. Her lips parted, just slightly. The air between us shifted, dense and electric, like the entire world had narrowed to this one fragile point. Elena, I whispered, her name tasting like a secret I'd been keeping too long. And then, she leaned in, just enough that I could feel the edge of her breath against my mouth. Close enough that a single inch would undo everything we'd been holding back. I froze, afraid to break it. Afraid to move too fast, to ruin the delicate balance that had brought us here. She didn't move either. Her hand hovered at my chest, trembling slightly, like she wanted to push me away but couldn't make herself do it. Tell me to stop, I said, my voice barely more than air. She blinked, her lashes fluttering, her gaze locked on mine. I can't, she whispered. And just like that, something broke, the last thin thread of restraint snapping clean. I tilted my head. closing the space between us until there was nothing left but the thundering of my pulse and the soft intake of her breath. Her hand finally settled against my chest, fingers curling into my shirt, not to push me away but to pull me closer. And then, the sharp rattle of the front door, the bell above it ringing loud in the charged quiet. We jerked apart, breathless, hearts hammering. Through the glass, I saw the outline of someone, a courier dropping off a package, oblivious to the moment they'd just shattered. Elena turned away, her hand flying to her hair, her composure snapping back into place like armor. But as the delivery guy left and the bell stilled, her gaze flicked back to mine. And this time, she didn't look away. "This can't keep happening," she said, voice steady. But her trembling hand on the counter betrayed her. It started with a whisper. A careless one, overheard when it shouldn't have been. I was restocking the display table near the front when I heard it. Two regulars by the window, their voices low but sharp enough to cut through the quiet. "She's been different lately," one said, that edge of gossip thick in her tone. "Please," the other scoffed. "You think we don't notice? Him. Always here. Always hanging around. People talk." I froze, the spine of a paperback tight in my grip. They didn't notice me standing there, didn't care. "Midlife crisis," one of them added, almost gleeful. "It's sad, really." My stomach twisted. When I turned, Elena was there, standing in the doorway to the back room, her expression unreadable, too controlled to be natural. She'd heard every word. And for the first time since this started, she didn't look at me. The rest of the afternoon passed in silence. She busied herself with inventory that didn't need doing, keeping distance between us like the air itself had become dangerous. By closing, the quiet between us was unbearable. "Elena," I said finally, my voice rough in the stillness. She didn't turn, just kept arranging the same stack of receipts she'd been pretending to sort for the last 10 minutes. "You should go," she said, her tone low even. "This isn't." She stopped, her shoulders tightening. "This isn't what you think it is." I stepped closer, pulse pounding, my throat tight. "Then tell me what it is," I said. "Because from where I'm standing, it's real. Whatever this is, it's real." That made her turn. Slowly. Her eyes were bright, sharp, but there was something fragile under the surface, like one wrong word might shatter her. "You don't understand," she whispered. "They'll ruin you for this. And me? They'll call me things I swore I'd never let myself become again." She moved past me then, brushing my arm. Not an accident, never an accident, but with enough distance to feel like punishment. I followed her to the back room. "Why are you so afraid of letting this happen?" I asked, my voice too loud, too desperate. She stopped, her back to me, her hands gripping the edge of the desk like it was the only thing keeping her steady. "Because I've done this before," she said finally, her voice breaking on the words. "I've trusted someone, and it cost me everything." The silence that followed was suffocating. I stepped closer, slow, careful, until there was barely a breath between us. "I'm not him," I said quietly. Her shoulders trembled. Not much, but enough. And then, when she finally turned, I saw it. The war in her expression, the longing, the fear, the desperate need to stay in control, and the even more desperate need to let it all go. "Ryan," she breathed, my name sounding like something that hurt to say. I reached up, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face, my fingers grazing her cheek. She didn't flinch this time, didn't move. Her breath hitched when I leaned in, close enough that her perfume wrapped around me, close enough that the heat radiating from her skin made my chest ache. "This," I whispered, "isn't going away, no matter how much you try to ignore it." Her eyes closed, just for a second, like she was surrendering to something she didn't want to name. And then, softer than a prayer, "Then don't make me stop." The world narrowed to nothing. No gossip, no rules, no lines we weren't supposed to cross. Just her trembling hands lifting until they hovered near my chest, her lips parting like she'd already decided but didn't know how to take the last step. I moved closer, so close I could feel the sharp, quick rhythm of her heartbeat in the space between us. She didn't pull back. And in that fragile moment, breathless and terrifying and inevitable, we both knew. There was no turning back. The storm outside had rolled in fast. Heavy rain slamming against the windows, wind howling through the alley like the city itself was holding its breath. Inside, the bookstore felt smaller, dimmer, the hum of the lights struggling against the storm. She stood by the counter, arms crossed like she was holding herself together. I stood a few feet away, soaked from running through the downpour to bring in the delivery boxes before they warped. My shirt clung to my skin, water dripping from my hair to the worn wood floor. Neither of us spoke. The only sound was the steady drum of rain and the thundering of my pulse. Finally, I broke the silence. "Say it," I whispered. "If you don't want this, tell me to walk away. Tell me, and I will." Her gaze met mine, sharp, defiant, but trembling underneath. "You think this is simple?" she said, her voice soft but cutting. "You think you can just want me, and that makes it okay?" I stepped closer, slow, deliberate. "I don't just want you," I said. "I can't stop thinking about you. Every night, every morning. I swallowed hard. "It's you, Elena. It's always been you." Her breath caught. A tiny sound, barely audible over the storm, but she didn't move when I closed the space between us. "Tell me to stop," I said again, my voice low, shaking with everything I couldn't say. Her arms dropped, her hands trembling at her sides. "I can't," she whispered, and that single word tore through whatever restraint I had left. I stepped in until there was nothing between us but heat and the sharp ache of wanting something I'd been denying for too long. She looked up at me then, really looked, and all the walls she'd been holding for weeks, months maybe, cracked. The air shifted. Her hand lifted, tentative, brushing the damp hair from my forehead. That simple touch undid me. My eyes closed, a sharp breath escaping as I leaned into her palm, like it was the only place I belonged. "Elena," I breathed, her name tasting like confession, like surrender. She hesitated, just for a moment, just long enough for fear to flicker in her eyes, and then she moved, closing the last inch of space between us. Her forehead rested against my shoulder, her breath warm against my neck, her hands gripping the fabric of my shirt like she wasn't sure if she was holding on or letting go. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "Then let me," I said, my voice shaking. "Let me be the one who doesn't hurt you. Just once, let it be simple." Slowly, carefully, I wrapped my arms around her. Not pulling, not claiming. Just holding, steady and certain, until I felt her body soften against mine, until her pulse steadied enough to match my own. When she finally lifted her head, her eyes met mine, and there it was, clarity. Not perfect, not easy, but real. "This changes everything," she murmured, almost to herself. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. Outside, the storm eased, the rain softening to a steady whisper. Inside, it felt like something had broken open, something terrifying and inevitable and entirely ours. I brushed a damp strand of hair from her cheek, my thumb grazing her jaw, and for the first time, she didn't look away. Whatever fear we'd been carrying, whatever hesitation had kept us circling the same unspoken truth, it was gone. In its place, there was only this: two people standing too close, breathing the same uneven air, finally done pretending they didn't belong in the same gravity. She didn't say yes. I didn't need her to, because when her hand slid up to rest against my chest, steady and sure, it told me everything. And in that quiet moment, with the storm fading outside and her heartbeat against my palm, I understood. Whatever came next, we weren't stepping back. The storm had passed by morning, leaving the city washed clean. The streets were quiet, slick with rain, and the smell of wet asphalt drifted through the open windows of the bookstore. Elena moved slowly through the shop, barefoot, a cardigan draped over her shoulders. She hadn't bothered with makeup, hadn't even tried to tame her hair, and somehow, that made her impossibly beautiful. I sat on the edge of the counter, watching her shelve a few new arrivals, pretending I wasn't staring. She caught me anyway. "What?" she asked, her voice soft, teasing in a way it hadn't been before. I shook my head, a smile pulling at my mouth. "Nothing. Just you." Her lips curved, faint but warm. She set the book down, crossing the room until she was standing between my knees, her hands sliding into the pockets of her cardigan. "You make this sound easy," she murmured, eyes steady on mine. "Like there aren't 1,000 reasons we shouldn't be doing this." I reached out, fingers brushing her wrist before lacing with hers. "Maybe there are," I admitted. "But none of them matter when it's you." Her breath hitched, that tiny, unguarded sound I'd come to crave. For a moment, we just stood there, the morning light spilling across the floor, dust motes turning slow circles in the air. Her thumb traced small circles against my palm, her other hand resting lightly against my chest, feeling the steady beat beneath her fingers. "This scares me," she confessed, almost a whisper. "I know," I said. "It scares me too." Her eyes lifted, meeting mine, clear, steady, and finally free of the hesitation that had always been there. "But," she said, her voice quiet but sure, "I don't want to stop." I leaned forward, pressing my forehead gently to hers, breathing her in. "Good," I murmured. "Because neither do I." It wasn't a grand declaration, nothing sharp or cinematic. Just a simple truth that felt heavier than anything else. We'd stopped pretending, and now there was no going back. Later, we sat together in the back of the shop, the world muted and still around us. She curled against me, her head resting on my shoulder, her fingers absently tracing lines along the back of my hand. I didn't speak. Neither did she. We didn't need to. Because for the first time since that first charged glance, there was no guilt, no doubt, no careful distance. Just quiet, honest closeness. At some point, I felt her breath even out, her body soften into mine, and I knew she'd drifted off. I didn't move. Didn't want to. Instead, I sat there, holding her, the quiet hum of the shop and the faint buzz of the city outside weaving into something that felt dangerously close to peace. When she stirred, blinking up at me with that sleepy, almost smile, I pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. "We'll figure it out," I said, and for the first time, I believed it. Her hand found mine again, fingers weaving through, grounding me. "Yeah," she whispered. "We will." And in that small, perfect moment, sitting in the quiet of the shop, her hand warm in mine, the weight of her trust settling in my chest, I knew this wasn't just some fleeting thing. It was real. It was ours. And whatever the world had to say about it, we'd find a way to stand in it together. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?